The wind screamed like a gutted animal, tearing through the black pines of Haven Point as if it wanted to rip the world apart. Xavier Thorne stumbled forward, his boots sinking into drifts that swallowed him to the knee, the lantern in his fist the only defiant spark against the swallowing dark. He had not meant to play savior that night. Not again. But the faint cry echoing from the ravine below his cabin had clawed at something buried deep, pulling him out into the storm before reason could chain him back. Down in the hollow, 3 shapes huddled against a fallen log, their faces blue-lipped and hollow-cheeked under hoods crusted with ice. The oldest, barely 18 by the look of his sharpened jaw, clutched a rusted knife like it was his last thread to the living world, eyes wild with the kind of fear that turns boys into ghosts. Xavier dropped to one knee, his voice cutting through the gale like gravel over silk. "Easy now. You're safe. Let me get you out of this hell." They stared at him, these lost souls, runaways from the crumbling edges of small-town America, fleeing fathers with fists like hammers and mothers who looked away. Caleb, the one with the knife, 17 and built like he could outrun the devil himself, had led them here from the bus station in Portland, a desperate hitchhike north turning into this frozen nightmare. Beside him, Rowan, 16, all sharp bones and haunted green eyes, shivered so violently his teeth chattered a Morse code of unspoken pleas. And Finn, the quiet 18-year-old with a scar snaking down his temple like a lightning bolt, pressed close to them both, his breath ragged, as if the cold had already claimed pieces of his soul. Xavier did not ask questions, not yet. He shrugged off his coat, draping it over the smallest one, Rowan, whose fingers trembled as they gripped the wool like a lifeline. "Cabins half a mile up the ridge. Lean on me." One by one, he hauled them upright, his arms burning under the strain, the storm battering them like an old grudge. Caleb went first, knife sheathed now, his pride warring with the exhaustion that made him slump against Xavier's side. Finn followed, silent as a shadow, but his hand found Xavier's elbow in the dark, a touch that lingered a beat too long, electric in the numb cold. The cabin emerged from the whiteout like a half-remembered dream, logs weathered to silver, chimney puffing smoke into the void, a single bulb swinging on the porch like a beacon for the damned. Xavier kicked the door open, the warmth inside hitting them like a slap. He guided them to the hearth, where embers glowed like dying stars, and stoked the fire high, flames leaping to life as if greedy for their stories. "Sit. I'll fetch blankets and something hot." Rowan collapsed onto the rug, curling into himself, tears carving hot paths down his frostbitten cheeks. We thought it was over." His voice cracked, small and raw, the words spilling out before he could cage them. Finn knelt beside him, rubbing his back with hands that shook less from cold now than from the unraveling inside. Caleb stood apart, arms crossed, scanning the room. The scarred oak table, the shelves of dog-eared paperbacks, the faded photo of a younger Xavier with a man whose smile mirrored his own, eyes narrowing as if piecing together the puzzle of the stranger who had become their reluctant god. Xavier moved like a man who knew the weight of silences, pouring steaming mugs of cider laced with whiskey from a hidden flask. He handed them out, his calloused fingers brushing theirs. First Rowan's, gentle as a whisper. Then Finn's, steady and sure. Finally Caleb's, where the contact sparked something fiercer, a jolt that made the boy pull back just a fraction too quick. "Names?" Xavier asked, settling into the armchair opposite, the firelight carving shadows across his face that spoke of winters harsher than this one. "Caleb," the leader said, voice steadying as the warmth seeped in. "This is Rowan. And Finn. We got turned around. Bus broke down south of here." Lies Xavier knew, but he let them hang in the air like smoke. He had his own ghosts, a lover lost to the same Maine waves that claimed fishermen yearly, a discharge from the Marines that left him hollow, drifting back to this cabin in Haven Point like flotsam. The town was a speck on the map, all lobster traps and lobster-red faces, where winters buried secrets deeper than graves. He had come here to forget, to chop wood and mend nets for neighbors who nodded but never pried. Saving these boys? It was madness, a crack in the ice he had so carefully laid over his heart. As the night deepened, the storm raging on, they peeled off wet layers under his watchful eye. Modesty be damned in the face of hypothermia. Xavier fetched dry clothes from his own drawer, flannels too big for their frames, hanging like forgiveness. Rowan stripped first, his body a map of faded bruises, ribs stark under pale skin, and Xavier averted his gaze, jaw tight, memories of his own boyhood scars flooding back. Finn, broader in the shoulders, bore his undressing like a soldier, but his eyes met Xavier's in the fire's glow, holding there with a question neither dared voice. Caleb last, peeling away his soaked shirt to reveal ink blooming across his chest. A crude tattoo of a compass rose, pointing nowhere, done in some back-alley parlor to mark his escape from a father who preached fire and brimstone from the pulpit of a dying church in rural Ohio. They ate then, stew from the pot hanging over the fire, thick with venison and root vegetables, the kind of meal that filled more than bellies. Words came haltingly at first. Rowan admitting the beatings, the nights locked in closets. Finn sharing the silence of a home where love was a word no one uttered. His mother gone to cancer, his stepdad to bourbon. Caleb spoke least, but his anger simmered like the cider. Tales of a town that turned its back when whispers of his difference started. Stolen glances at the quarterback in gym class. A kiss behind the bleachers that shattered everything. Xavier listened, the fire popping like punctuation, his own story emerging in fragments. "I know that cold," he said finally, staring into the flames. "Not just the snow. The kind that settles in your bones when folks decide you're wrong for breathing." He told them of David, his David, the man who had taught him to love without apology, until the Atlantic took him in a squall off Monhegan Island 5 years back. The words hung heavy, a bridge built of shared ache, and in the quiet that followed, something shifted. Rowan's hand found Finn's, fingers lacing tight. Caleb's gaze lingered on Xavier, tracing the lines of his neck, the way his throat worked when he swallowed. Dawn crept in gray and grudging, the storm spent, leaving a world muffled in white. Xavier rose early, boots crunching as he shoveled a path to the truck. Radio crackling with warnings of roads still closed. The boys stirred, bleary-eyed, the cabin smelling of wood smoke and unspoken promises. "You can't stay here forever," he said over coffee, black and bitter. "But the pass to Ellsworth should clear by noon. It'll drive you to the shelter there, folks who know how to handle runaways without the judgment." Caleb nodded, but his eyes said otherwise, a storm of his own brewing. "Why help us? You don't even know us." Xavier paused, lantern light from last night still flickering in his memory. "Because I was you once, lost, and someone pulled me out." He didn't mention the price, the years of hiding, the town that whispered queer like a curse. Instead, he packed sandwiches, extra blankets, and a wad of cash from his jar, pressing it into Rowan's palm with a gruff, "For the road." The drive was a tense unraveling, the truck's heater blasting against the chill that lingered in their bones. Finn stared out at the endless white, fingers drumming the dash. Rowan dozed against his shoulder, safe in a way he had never known. Caleb rode shotgun, knees bouncing, stealing glances at Xavier's profile. The strong hands on the wheel, the quiet strength that made his chest ache in ways he couldn't name. At the shelter in Ellsworth, a squat brick building with fogged windows and a sign reading Hope Harbor. They hesitated on the threshold, the world beyond too vast, too indifferent. "Take care of each other," Xavier said, voice rough as the gravel underfoot. He pulled Caleb into a hug then, brief but bone deep, the boy's heart hammering against his. "You're not lost anymore. Remember that." They watched him go, taillights fading into the flurry. 3 boys turned brothers by a night that could have been their end. And in the warmth of that borrowed cabin, seeds of something deeper had taken root, love, not just for each other, but for the man who had thawed their frozen world. Weeks blurred into months for the boys at Hope Harbor, a limbo of group therapy circles and job training sessions under fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped flies. Haven Point faded to a fever dream, but Xavier lingered in their veins like the whiskey in that cider. A warmth they chased in stolen moments. Caleb threw himself into the routine, his anger channeling into shifts at the local cannery, gutting fish with a precision that masked the turmoil inside. He wrote letters he never sent, pages filled with questions about the compass tattoo's true north, about the way Xavier's laugh had rumbled low when Rowan cracked a joke about city boys melting in the snow. Rowan bloomed quieter, sketching in the margins of donated notebooks. Pines twisted against storms, a faceless man with lantern light in his eyes. Finn, ever the anchor, found work fixing boats at the marina. his scarred hands steadying hulls while his mind replayed the brush of Xavier's fingers, a touch that had awakened hungers he had buried under layers of denial. They shared a room, 3 cots in a row, whispers crossing the dark like bridges. "He saw us," Finn murmured one night, moon slanting through the blinds. "Not the runaways. Us." By spring, thaw turned the earth to mud, and decisions loomed. Caleb, 19 now in the eyes of the law if not his heart, signed papers for emancipation, vowing to carve a path back to stability. "We're getting out of here," he told them over lukewarm pizza in the rec room. "Seattle. Fresh start. Tech jobs. Rain instead of this damn damp." Rowan nodded, eyes bright. Finn squeezed his knee under the table, a silent vow. They pooled what little they had, cannery checks, marina tips, and boarded a Greyhound west, the Maine coast shrinking in the rear view of their dreams. Seattle hit them like a revelation. Skyscrapers piercing low clouds, markets alive with fishmongers hawking Dungeness crab, streets thrumming with lives unapologetic in their chaos. They crashed in a studio walk-up in Capitol Hill, walls thin as secrets, bunk beds stacked like defiance. Caleb landed at a startup, coding apps that connected lost pets to owners, irony not lost on him. Rowan enrolled in community college, art classes unleashing colors he had kept caged. Finn bartended at a dive called the Rusty Anchor, slinging IPAs to flannel-clad techies, his smile a weapon that disarmed tips and tensions alike. Nights were theirs, a tangle of limbs and laughter on thrift store futons, exploring bodies and boundaries with the tentative grace of survivors. Caleb and Finn first, a kiss born of storm-shared adrenaline, hands mapping scars like treasure. Rowan watched, then joined, his touch featherlight, a trio bound not by possession but by the freedom Xavier had gifted them. "He's why we can do this," Caleb said once, post-climax haze, tracing Finn's jaw. "Why we're not afraid." Years spun forward, relentless as the Puget Sound tides. Caleb rose through ranks, his app evolving into a platform for queer youth networks. Thorn lines named in shadowed tribute. Rowan exhibited in galleries, portraits of anonymous saviors in oil, faces half-lit by hearths. Finn opened his own garage, specializing in vintage Harleys, ink now covering arms that once trembled. They built a life, a craftsman house in Fremont with a garden overrun by blackberries. Rings exchanged in a backyard ceremony under drizzling skies, vows whispered like, "I found you in the cold." But Xavier haunted the edges, a specter in holiday cards postmarked from Haven Point. "Storms pass. Keep your fires lit." Caleb kept them in a box under the bed, rereading by flashlight when doubts crept in. What if the world outside their bubble turned? What if the man who saved them needed saving in return? Came on a Tuesday in late fall, rain lashing the windows like accusations. Caleb scrolled news feeds during lunch, fork pausing mid-air as the headline screamed, "Maine cabin owner accused of assault in shocking gay panic case." Xavier Thorne's face stared back. Older, grayer at the temples, but those hazel eyes unchanged, now rimmed with the steel of a man cornered. The article spun a tale of Twisted. A local kid, drunk and belligerent, had stumbled onto Xavier's land, slurs flying like fists. Xavier had restrained him, called the cops. But the boy, son of the town sheriff, claimed assault, painting Xavier as the predator, dredging up whispers of his lifestyle with David as proof of deviance. Caleb's phone slipped from numb fingers, clattering to the cafe floor. "No," he breathed, the word a prayer and a curse. Rowan and Finn got the call minutes later, dropping tools and brushes to huddle in the kitchen, screen glowing accusations. "He saved us," Rowan whispered, tears carving familiar paths. "And now they're burying him alive." Finn paced, fists clenched. "We go back. We tell the truth." But truth in Haven Point? It was a blade double-edged. Exposing their past meant bearing scars to a town that chewed up queerness like chum. Caleb stared at the compass on his chest, faded but fierce. "He didn't just save our lives. He gave us ours. We owe him everything." They booked flights that night, hearts pounding like the storm that had birthed them. Seattle receded, a cocoon shed, as the plane banked east over endless forests. Xavier's arraignment loomed in 2 days, a circus of reporters and pitchfork locals in the county courthouse. The boys, no, the men, clutched hands across the aisle, resolve hardening like frost. Betrayal stung. How could Haven Point turn on its own ghost? But deeper, a fear gnawed. What if defending him meant losing the fragile peace they had forged? Touchdown in Portland brought salt air and memories. A rental car whipping north through autumn blaze. They stopped at the cabin first, unannounced. The door creaking open to reveal Xavier, thinner, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. He froze in the threshold, lantern long traded for a shotgun propped by the wall. You, how? Caleb stepped forward, voice steady as the day he dropped the knife. We saw, and we're here to fight. Xavier's laugh was a broken thing, relief cracking through. He pulled them inside, the hearth cold but for embers of old. Hugs turned to stories, years compressed into hours. Wedding photos on phones, sketches of the cabin immortalized, Harleys gleaming in garage bays. But under it, the ache. Xavier's trial wasn't just about that night. It was the town's reckoning, dredging his past, painting him as the devil who corrupted boys long gone. I never touched you wrong, he said, voice raw. You know that. We know, Finn murmured, hand on his shoulder, the touch reigniting sparks long banked. Rowan nodded, tears falling. And well make them know too. As night fell, the cabin hummed with purpose, plans sketched on napkins by firelight. Betrayal loomed large. The sheriff's son twisting facts, neighbors who once borrowed his tools now signing petitions. But in each other, in the man who had thawed them, they found steel. The world waited, cameras flashing like lightning, but for the first time, the storm felt winnable. The drive to the courthouse sliced through Haven Point like a vein, autumn leaves bleeding red and gold across cracked asphalt. Xavier rode shotgun, knuckles white on the dash, the weight of the town pressing in from all sides, lobster buoys bobbing in coves, faded welcome signs mocking the prodigal return. Caleb navigated, eyes fixed ahead, Rowan's hands steady on his thigh from the back seat, Finn's quiet presence a bulwark against the rearview ghosts. We face it together, Caleb said, voice a vow etched in ice. No holding back. The courthouse squatted on the square like a judgmental elder. Granite steps slick with drizzle. Reporters clustered like crows under black umbrellas. Flashes erupted as they emerged. Questions hurled like stones. Mr. Thorne, did you lure those boys years ago? Are you the monster the sheriff says? Xavier stiffened, but Caleb stepped forward. Chin lifted. The boy from the ravine now a man forged in code and conviction. Back off. We're here for justice, not your headlines. Inside, the air hung thick with varnish and old grudges. Wooden benches creaking under locals in Carhartt jackets. Whispers snaking through rows. The judge, a stern woman named Harlan with silver hair pinned tight, called order, her gavel a crack of thunder. The prosecutor, slick as oil in a pinstripe suit, painted Xavier as predator incarnate. This man, isolated in his cabin of sin, preyed on vulnerability. The victim, barely 20, stumbled upon depravity and fought back. Evidence mounted, twisted photos, affidavits from witnesses who claimed Xavier's proclivities were town lore since David's death. Xavier sat rigid, testifying in clipped tones. The kid's slurs, the scuffle to disarm a bottle swung wild, the 911 call time-stamped clean. But the prosecutor circled like a shark, dredging the past. And those 3 runaways, Mr. Thorne? The ones you rescued? Convenient they vanished west. What really happened in that storm? The room tilted for Xavier, memories flooding. Blankets shared, stories bared. The innocent press of bodies against cold. He met Caleb's eyes across the aisle. Steady now, a lifeline tossed. I saved them, gave them a chance. That's all. Then came their turn. Caleb took the stand first, sworn in with a hand that did not shake. He recounted the storm in vivid strokes. The wind's howl, the hollow's grip, Xavier's lantern cutting dark like grace. He didn't ask for our secrets. He just pulled us out. The prosecutor sneered, probing. Age gaps, the cabin's seclusion, implications laced with venom. Intimate details, Mr. Hale? Or convenient fiction? Caleb leaned forward, voice dropping to steel. Intimate? He gave us clothes, food, a fire. What he gave us was life. Without him, we'd be bones in that ravine. Gasps rippled. A woman in the back clutched her pearls. But Caleb pressed on, unveiling the bruises, the flights from hell's domestic, the way Xavier's quiet strength modeled survival without shame. Rowan followed, his artist's soul spilling in words as layered as his canvases. I was 16, broken like glass. He saw the pieces, didn't try to fix them, just held space. Sketches materialized from his portfolio, projected on a screen. The cabin hearth, 3 figures thawing. Xavier's silhouette a guardian in the glow. The prosecutor faltered, objecting to propaganda. But the judge allowed, the images lingering like accusations against the town's hypocrisy. Finn closed the triad, his testimony a hammer blow, mechanics' precision stripping lies bare. I carried scars before that night. He added none. Taught us, by example, that love isn't a weapon. He spoke of the hug at the shelter, chaste and anchoring. Of letters that bridged years, never crossing lines but illuminating paths. The scar on his temple caught the light, a badge of battles won. He's no monster. He's the man who made us believe we weren't. The courtroom hushed, the air electric with unspoken reckonings. Locals shifted, eyes downcast. Old-timers who had fished with Xavier, borrowed his truck, now complicit in the betrayal. Outside, protesters clashed with supporters, signs reading "Justice for Thorn," clashing against "Protect our youth." But inside, the tide turned subtle. The judge's brow furrowed, jury members leaning forward, faces softening like snow under sun. Adjournment brought chaos, reporters swarming, hands thrusting mics like spears. Caleb shielded Xavier, Finn and Rowan flanking, a phalanx unbreakable. They retreated to a diner on the edge of town, formica tables scarred as their histories, coffee steaming in mugs chipped like teeth. You did good, Xavier said, voice gravel thick with unshed tears. But this, it ain't over. They'll dig deeper. Caleb reached across, fingers lacing with his, the touch a spark reigniting embers. Let them. We've got more to give. In that booth, under neon buzz, confessions simmered, years of what-ifs, the pull that had shadowed their Seattle idol. Xavier's eyes held Caleb's, hazel depths swirling with the same hunger, tempered now by time and trial. Rowan sketched idly on a napkin, Finn's boot nudging his under the table, the 4 of them a constellation realigning. Night fell heavy, the cabin a sanctuary ringed by pines that whispered warnings. They cooked, chowder from clams Xavier trapped, bread from the oven, dinner stretching into dawn confessions. Xavier spoke of David fully, the love that had been his North Star, lost to waves that cared not for vows. I thought I'd never feel that pull again. His gaze on Caleb was a question, raw and reverent. Caleb answered with a kiss, soft at first, then deepening like the storm that bound them. Hands and hair, breaths mingling, Rowan and Finn watching with smiles that held no jealousy, only joy in the circle completing. It was romance reborn, not frantic but profound, bodies mapping familiar aches with new tenderness. In the loft bed, under quilts patched from old flannels, they tangled, Xavier's strength yielding to Caleb's fire, Rowan's whispers guiding, Finn's steadiness grounding. Love, multifaceted, bloomed in the quiet, a defiance against the world's blade. Morning brought the second day, continuances and cross-exams sharpening to knives. The prosecutor called the victim, the sheriff's son, a lanky 22-year-old with eyes darting like cornered prey. His story crumbled under Finn's glare, admitting the bottle, the slurs, the panic born of his own buried truths. I lashed out. Didn't mean for this. The revelation cracked the case wide. Emails unearthed. The boy confessing in therapy logs to internalized hate, projecting shadows onto Xavier. Jury murmurs swelled. The judge recessed, her ruling pending. But betrayal's sting lingered. The sheriff, red-faced in the hall, hissing at Caleb. You outsiders stirring pots. Caleb met his gaze unflinching. We were your lost boys once. Now we're the men who won't let you bury the truth. As snow flurried early, blanketing Haven Point in white penance, the 4 retreated to the cabin, hearts pounding with the weight. Xavier pulled Caleb close by the fire, lips brushing ear. Whatever comes, you've given me more than I saved. The words wove through them, a tapestry of redemption, as the world outside held its breath. The verdict dropped like a nor'easter, swift and unrelenting. Not guilty, the judge's voice ringing clear over gasps and shuffles. Xavier stood, shoulders unbowing for the first time in months, as the courtroom erupted. Supporters cheering, detractors slinking out like scolded dogs. Caleb surged forward, enveloping him in an embrace that drew flashes from lingering cameras. Rowan's laugh bubbling free, Finn's arms slung around them all in a huddle of hard-won victory. "It's over," Caleb murmured into Xavier's neck. The words a balm against the scars the trial had ripped open. But over? Not quite. The media storm raged on, headlines twisting triumph into spectacle. Runaway heroes defend gay savior in Maine miracle. Talk shows beckoned, podcasts dissected. The story ballooning into a narrative of queer resilience that both exalted and exposed. Back in the cabin, packing for the airport, Xavier paced, his freedom a fragile thing. "They'll want your faces now. Your lives. You sure about this?" Finn zipped a duffel scar catching firelight. "We chose it. Long as you're with us." The kiss that followed was fierce, sealing pacts unspoken. Xavier joining the westward exodus. Seattle's reign a promise of reinvention. They flew out at dusk, the plane lifting over snow-dusted pines. Haven Point shrinking to a pinpoint of healed wound. Seattle welcomed them with open arms and ulterior motives. Thorn lines exploded, Caleb's platform flooded with stories from youth echoing their own. Tips on shelters, forums for coming out, virtual lanterns in digital storms. Rowan sold out his next show, Thaw. Canvases of blurred figures in whiteouts fetching 5 figures from collectors hungry for hope. Finn's garage thrived, Xavier pitching in with his marine-honed mechanics, hands black with grease as they rebuilt engines side by side, banter flowing easy as oil. Home became haven. The Fremont craftsman expanded, a 4th bedroom for Xavier overlooking the garden, where blackberries rioted unchecked. Evenings unfolded in rhythms intimate, dinners of grilled salmon and quinoa salads, laughter over board games that dissolved into touches tracing collarbones. Romance wove through them polyphonic. Xavier and Caleb's passion a steady burn, nights of slow exploration where age's wisdom met youth's fire. Rowan drawing Xavier's portrait, sessions turning to caresses that left charcoal smudges on skin. Finn and Xavier bonding over midnight Harley rides, ending in barns off backroads, bodies urgent under stars. Yet cracks spidered subtle. Xavier chafed at the spotlight, interviews dredging David's ghost, his reticence clashing with Caleb's drive to amplify. "We're not exhibits," he growled one night, after a TEDx invite turned sour with probing questions on the cabin dynamic. Caleb softened, pulling him to the porch swing, rain pattering like apologies. "We're building something real. Let it be ours." Deeper still, betrayal's echo lingered, not from Haven Point, but internal. Rowan withdrew into canvases darker, strokes heavy with doubt. What if we're just the story now? Saviors and saved, not men. Finn anchored him, but his own fears surfaced in dreams, waking sweat slick, whispering of storms reclaiming. Xavier, the elder, bore it quietest, but Caleb caught him staring at old photos, hazel eyes distant as the Atlantic. The pivot came unbidden, a call from a producer in LA. "Your story's gold. Netflix series, Stormbound. We want authenticity. You consult." Caleb jumped, visions of scripted catharsis dancing. Xavier balked, the idea of their raw nights commodified a violation. Arguments simmered, first low over breakfast. "It's our truth to tell," Caleb urged, then boiling in the kitchen. Words like selfish and sheltered flung like barbs. The fracture peaked on a crisp October eve, leaves flaming in the yard. Rowan mediated, sketchpad abandoned. Finn poured whiskeys, neat. "We survived a blizzard," he said, glass raised. "This? It's a squall." Confessions poured. Xavier's terror of erasure, Caleb's guilt over pushing, the shared ache of loving without limits in a world that boxed queerness. They mended in the hot tub under Aurora whispers, bodies submerging tensions, emerging renewed, promises to co-write the script, boundaries etched firm. Production whisked them south, palm trees a shock after evergreens, the Chateau Marmont a gilded cage of script reads and wardrobe fittings. Xavier thawed to it, his gruff charm winning writers, anecdotes of the rescue spun into dialogue that punched hearts. Caleb directed cameos, their wedding footage woven in. Rowan consulted on visuals, Snow effects evoking chills. Finn charmed grips with shop talk. Betrayal revisited in tabloid leaks. Rumors of throuple drama. Sheriff's son suing for defamation, but they faced it schooled. Press conferences laced with wit and weight. Climax brewed on set. A reenactment of the Hollow. Extras as frozen boys. Xavier in the hero's coat. Lantern reel. As action called. Snow machines whirring. Caleb watched from monitors. Heart clenching at the echo. Xavier hauling Rowan up. Face etched with the same resolve. Cut rang, and tears came unbidden. Crew applauding as the four collapsed in grips. "You did it again," Caleb whispered, kiss salt tanged. "Saved us." Post-rap, award season glittered, Emmys for writing, buzz for social impact, but home called louder. Back in Fremont, the garden yielded late berries, stained fingers marking lazy afternoons. Xavier proposed expansion. A foundation, lantern lights, funding shelters from Maine to the Sound. They launched it in Haven Point, full circle, the town transformed. Rainbow flags on buoys, locals nodding at plaques commemorating the storm. Yet romance deepened shadows. Xavier and Caleb's love hit tempests. A weekend apart in Maine for Xavier's annual vigil at David's marker, jealousy flaring when Caleb stayed west. "He's your ghost," Caleb accused on a crackling call. Hurt raw. Reconciliation burned hot. Make-up sex in the cabin a reclamation. But trust's thread frayed, whispering of losses yet to come. As winter loomed, snow dusting the Cascades, a letter arrived. Anonymous, postmarked Ellsworth. Threats veiled in scripture, echoes of old pulpits. The sheriff's network, unquenched. Fear coiled, but so did resolve. "We stand," Finn said, tools down. Like always. In that unity, the heart of their story pulsed. Love not as fairy tale, but forge, hammering vulnerabilities to strength. Winter clamped down on Seattle like a vice, skies leaden. The sound churning gray under relentless gales. Lantern lights flourished, grants flowing to outposts in Ohio and Texas. But the threats escalated. Tires slashed on Finn's Harley. Rowan's gallery vandalized with slurs scrawled in red. Xavier traced them to a fringe group, Purity Watch, splintered from Haven Point's old guard. Their manifesto a bile of defending boys from deviance. The betrayal cut deepest from within. A board member, a reformed runaway they had mentored, leaking details for a payout. Caleb fortified, cybersecurity locks on the Foundation servers, but paranoia seeped home. Curtains drawn, walks in pairs. "We're prisoners in our own life," Rowan murmured one night, brush idle, canvas blank. Xavier pulled him close, lips to temple. "Then we fight free." They hired investigators, a queer ex-cop named Jax from Portland, his reports mapping a web. The sheriff's son bankrolling, anonymous donors from megachurches east. Climax brewed in spring, blossoms mocking the rot. An invite arrived, a summit in D.C., hosted by a progressive caucus, Voices of Resilience. Caleb saw opportunity, testify, expose the harassers. Xavier hesitated. D.C.'s marble halls a far cry from cabin hearths. Spotlight again? After everything. But Caleb's eyes, fierce with love, swayed. This time, it's power. Ours. The team flew east, cherry trees in riot. The city a hum of suits and secrets. Their panel drew crowds. Activists, Pauls, cameras live-streaming to millions. Caleb spoke first, voice amplified. "We were lost boys, saved by a man who taught us love's not a sin." Slides flashed. The hollow sketch, wedding vows, foundation stats. Rowan followed, art projected vast, evoking tears. Finn grounded it mechanic solid. Tools fix what's broken. Truth fixes lies. Xavier closed, hazel eyes steady on the sea of faces. "I didn't save them for glory, but they saved me." Showed a world where holding hands isn't a crime. Applause thundered, but backstage, Jax pulled them aside. "Got the ringleader. Meet at the motel tonight." The sting unfolded in a dingy room off K Street. Neon flickering vacancy like a dare. The ex-runaway waited, cuffed by feds, face crumpling as Caleb entered. "I needed the money. For my kid." Betrayal's face human and hollow. Xavier loomed, voice low thunder. "You were family." "How?" Words tumbled. "Debts, desperation, Purity watches whispers promising absolution. But Jax had tapes, confessions implicating the sheriff's network, funds traced to offshore sins. Raids hit simultaneous. Haven Point dawn, DC arrests, headlines flipping script overnight. Queer saviors unmask bigot ring. Blared screens, the four at the epicenter untouchable. Relief washed homeward, but scars itched. In Fremont, they hosted a barbecue. Friends, mints, grills smoking salmon. Celebration laced with quiet. Xavier and Caleb retreated to the garden. Berries forgotten, argument reigniting old fires. You pushed for DC. Dragged us into the maw. Caleb fired back. Hid? That's surrender. Fists clenched, then unclenched, mouths crashing in fury-born need. Grass-staining knees as they reclaimed through release. Rowan captured it later, a mural for the house. For figures in storm, hands linked, faces turned to breaking dawn. Our story, he said, paint-flecked. Finn nodded, wrenching a loose porch board. And it ain't ending. Yet endings loomed subtle. Xavier's cough started innocuous, dry hacks dismissed as pollen. But scans in summer revealed shadows. Lungs scarred from marine dust, cancer coiling quiet. He hid it first, doctor's notes in a drawer, but Caleb found them rifling for tax forms. How long? The question shattered the kitchen. Rowan freezing mid-chop, Finn's beer bottle pausing. Weeks, months with treatment. Xavier's voice steady, but eyes betrayed the storm. Betrayal anew. Not his choice, but fate's cruel twist, robbing the man who thawed worlds of his own warmth. They rallied. Specialists in Seattle, trials experimental, hands held through needles and nausea. Romance shifted tender. Nights of stories swapped. Caleb reading David's letters aloud. Rowan sketching Xavier's sleeping form. Finn massaging knotted calves. Publicly, they armored. A press release framing it as battle, lantern lights auctioning art for research. Fans flooded in letters from kids saved, echoing their rescue. But privately, fears gnawed. What if I leave you half-finished? Xavier whispered to Caleb one chemo-fogged eve, fingers tracing the compass. Then we finish it, Caleb replied, kiss a seal. You taught us that. Summer waned, treatments a gauntlet, Xavier thinning but unbowed. They road-tripped Maine, Harley's rumbling coastal roads, scattering David's ashes mingled with new, hope's grit. In Haven Point, the cabin stood sentinel, locals leaving pies on porches. Redemption slow but real. Back west, autumn painted leaves fire, mirroring the burn in their veins. Climax crested in a hospital vigil. Monitors beeping dirge. The four circled like wolves. Xavier rallied, vitals spiking, doctors murmuring miracles. Told you, he rasped, grin cracking lips. Storms pass. Laughter bubbled. Tears salting. Love's depth a well endless. As leaves fell, so did threats. Purity watch dismantled, trials convicting ringleaders. The world watched their defense evolve to defiance, a testament to identity's unyielding. In quiet moments, Xavier pulled Caleb close. You're my north now. The words wove future, fragile but fierce. Fall deepened to winter's threshold, Seattle's rains softening to mist, the Fremont house aglow with strung lights, tiny rebellions against encroaching dark. Xavier's remission held tenuous, scans clean as fresh snow, but the shadow taught vigilance. Weekly check-ins, diets of kale and resolve, the four orbiting tighter orbits gravitational. Lantern lights expanded nationwide, chapters in New Orleans bayous and Texas plains. Lost boys finding lanterns in apps and art collectives. Romance ripened nuanced. Xavier and Caleb's bond, tempered by illness, bloomed domestic. Mornings of coffee-shared silences. Evenings of vinyl spins. Coltrane sax weaving through lovemaking slow as sunsets. Rowan and Finn anchored the flanks, their love a steady pulse. Workbench trysts in the garage, paint-smeared afternoons in the studio. But the Poly Heartbeat Collective, date nights quadrupling to dinners in hole-in-the-wall faux spots, hands brushing under tables like secrets shared. Yet conflict simmered perennial. A foundation donor, old money from Boston, questioned the unconventional structure. Emails laced with veiled homophobia. Caleb bristled, ready to torch bridges. Xavier counseled cool. Win them slow. Show the work. Tensions peaked at a gala in Pioneer Square, chandeliers dripping gold over tuxes and gowns. The donor cornered them, champagne flute tilted accusatory. Inspiring, but the optics. Families expect traditional. Rowan, usually soft-spoken, fired first. Our family saved lives. Yours funds judgment. The room hushed, then erupted in murmurs supportive, the donor retreating red-faced. Later, in the limo home, laughter dissolved barriers, bodies spilling across leather seats in a tangle celebratory, kisses tasting of victory and vintage. Deeper waters stirred with Rowan's solo show in New York, echoes unthawed, pulling him east for weeks, distance tested. Nightly calls crackled with longing, Finn's voice rough. Miss your sketches on my skin. Xavier filled voids, teaching Rowan gallery politics over FaceTime, but jealousy flickered, unspoken, but felt in Caleb's clipped tones. Reunion at LaGuardia was a maelstrom. Arms enveloping, cabs to lofts where walls became canvases for reunion's art, bodies reclaiming space with urgency painted broad. Betrayal revisited insidious. A mentee, a 17-year-old from rural Idaho named Theo, confessed crush on Caleb during a hotline shift, innocent, but echoing their origins. Caleb handled gentle, boundaries firm, but doubt wormed. Am I the magnet now, or the monster? Group therapy, mandated post-trial, unearthed it. Sessions in a circle of beanbags, tears and truths bared. Xavier led unwittingly. We save because we were saved, but healing's not hoarding. The words mended, Theo guided to peers, trust reforged in vulnerability's fire. Climax crested unscripted, a snowstorm slamming the sound, echo of Genesis, flights grounded, power flickering. Stranded at a cabin rental in the Olympics, pines bowing under white, they hunkered. Wood chopped by Finn's axe, stew simmering, lanterns lit real. As wind wailed, stories circled. Ghosts of David, bruises faded, Harleys raced. Xavier rose, voice cutting gale. 15 years since that night. Look at us. Caleb pulled him down, kiss deepening to declaration. You started it. We finish. The loft became confessional, bodies a chorus. Xavier's hands on Rowan's hips, guiding rhythms learned. Finn's mouth on Caleb's throat, marks like constellations. Union's shifting fluid, love's geometry infinite. Dawn broke white and wondrous, drifts sculpted guardians. The storm's gift a mirror. They had weathered, emerged luminous. Resolution unfolded gradual, humanistic in its quiet. Lantern lights hit milestone. 1,000 youths housed, stories compiled in a tome. Lantern lives, prefaced by their quartet. Xavier, Hail Now, captained expansions, main chapter reopening the cabin as retreat. Weddings renewed under summer solstice, vows expanded. Through storms and silences, we choose us. Years layered gentle. Gray's silvering temples, laugh lines etching maps of joy. Caleb authored memoir, Compass North, bestseller bridging divides. Rowan lectured, art in museums. Finn mentored apprentices, garage a hub. Xavier fished sound dawns, rod casting hopes. Betrayals? Mere footnotes, occasional slurs online, doubts internal. Met with compassion's blade, cutting clean. In twilight's hush, on the porch swing creaking familiar, Xavier traced Caleb's compass, fingers steady. Saved 3 boys, found 3 men, and a life. Caleb leaned in, lips brushing. And freedom, in every breath. Rowan sketched from the glider. Finn poured cider lace subtle. The 4 a tableau eternal, human, flawed, unbound. The world watched, learned. Compassion's thaw melts walls. Identity's fire warms without consuming. In Haven Point's pines or Seattle's spires, their story whispered. Love saves, defends, endures.